Hey book lovers, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I am going over my wrap up for February. So these are all of the books that I read in February, and I hope that you like mystery thriller because that's what I read. Everything fits into the mystery thriller, maybe leaning on a little bit of horror in nature. So it was a really great reading month. I have 9 books to talk about with you guys today. It's the 25th of February, so I still have a couple of days left, but currently reading The Stand by Stephen King, and I'm not going to finish that in the next 3 days. It's like a 1,200 page book, and I think the audiobook is 48 hours or something like that. So that will definitely, hopefully be finished in March. So I think this is a pretty solid wrap up for February. So to kick things off, the first book that I finished in February is Things We Do in the Dark by Jennifer Hillier. So this was a book that I owned, and one of my reading goals for 2025 is to read the books that I own. That way I can move them off of my bookshelf, or if they become a favorite, then I have a copy that I can keep, but trying to get through my physical TBR. So Things We Do in the Dark is about a woman named Paris whose husband dies, and her husband's quite a bit older than her. He has a lot of money, and she is accused of killing him. So it is about her life in regards to being charged for his murder and being in jail and trying to figure out what happened to her husband. You come to find out that Paris maybe has some things in her past and she's not a very innocent person in other regards. It also follows a man who has a kind of true crime podcast, and he is following some cases, and then the stories collide from there. This was a good book. I enjoyed it. I gave it a 3 stars. 3 stars for me is very much middle of the road. I enjoyed it. It's not something I highly recommend to anybody. It's nothing I'm going to remember, forgettable for me, but still enjoyed it while I was reading it. I don't know if I've read any more of her books or not, but I liked this book well enough. I would like to check out more of her other novels. Okay, this next one, Kill for Me, Kill for You by Steve Cavanaugh. This was the February book club pick for Sense and Sentences. I will leave that Facebook down below if you guys want to join a book club. It's virtual, obviously. We go live once a month to talk about the book. So this book we have done the discussion on. So if you've read this book or will read in the future, we have that live where we discuss it. And we discuss other things as well too, but most of it encompasses this novel. The book we're reading for March is The Wedding People. So if you wanted to join in for March, that live will be March 21st. It's a Friday. So Kill for Me, Kill for You was the February pick. And you guys, this was a 5-star read if I've ever read one. And thrillers are really hard for me as far as something really standing out because I read so many of them. Mystery and thriller is definitely my #1 genre. I read many a mystery thriller novel. So you can see from this video today, everything I'm talking about fits into that category. So a book really has to stand out for me to give it 5 stars. And this one was 5 stars. No question. It has very short chapters, which is really easy to read, and almost every chapter kind of ends on a cliffhanger in a way, and so you want to turn the pages. And I think short chapters really just kind of help propel you through the book quicker. So this is about 2 women that have been wronged in their life. They've had loved ones, family members die, and they are essentially looking to avenge their deaths and kill the men who killed their family members. They meet in this support group and they decide to do the old Alfred Hitchcock stranger on a train swap, and each of them would kill the other person's killer, if that makes sense. The two women, they swapped who they were going to kill, if that makes any sense. And then in the other parts of the book, you follow Ruth. And Ruth is a woman. She's married with a husband. She was attacked late one night in her home and stabbed multiple times, and they didn't know who did it. So Ruth has this intense fear of being out in public, of the man coming back to attack her again. And for most of the book, you don't understand how these two stories connect. And then when you find out how they connect, my mind was so blown, you guys. If you like a good action-packed, twisty thriller, this one is it. Now, there are a couple things in here, you know, about child death and things like that. So just, I don't know, maybe keep those kind of triggers in mind. There's some harder topics in this book, but oh, it was so good. I'll have to look and see. I'm pretty sure this was my best book of February. Yeah. Other books I really enjoyed this month, but this definitely was my favorite book for February. So really starting out the book club strong, which is great. I hope that we can live up to this hype because this one was fantastic. Highly recommend. Then I read The Crash by Freida McFadden. This is her newest novel, and I have to say, this lady is pumping out books every 6 months or so. She's got another one coming out this year called The Tenant, and this one was not my favorite of her novels, and so I kind of wonder, is it just a personal preference thing? Which it probably is, but also maybe she should take some time to slow down. She's come out just this year with like 4 books, and I think that is crazy fast. This was still a good book. I gave it a 3-star, but there have been some Freida McFadden books that have just absolutely wowed me, and I kind of go into reading Freida McFadden thinking I'm going to be wowed, and this one just fell a little bit short in that department. Still a good book, though. This is about a woman named Tegan, and Tegan is pregnant. The dad is not going to be around. She's trying to figure out what to do. She doesn't have much money, and her brother, who lives in Maine, says, why don't you come stay with me for a little bit and we'll figure it out. So Tegan leaves on this road trip up north, and she gets stuck in a snowstorm, and I think crashes her car or something into a tree. Well, this man comes and helps her and brings him back to his home with his wife to take care of her and to kind of wait out the storm. And obviously maybe this home isn't as helpful as it could be. And so it's about Tegan's time in this home, her baby, and those interactions. What I think really did this book for me was how the ending played out. If it would have played out differently, I think that I could have enjoyed this book more, but the way that this book ended made me frustrated. I cannot understand. Tegan does something at the end of the book that I cannot understand. If I was in that situation, my thoughts would be very different, but teach their own. Everybody has different opinions and how they would handle situations, but the way that she handles something at the end of the book and the way the book leaves off left me very frustrated and felt weak. It felt like Freida McFadden didn't know how to end it, and so this is what she did. So not my favorite of her novels, still enjoyable, gave it 3 stars, and if you're a big fan of her books like I am, obviously still read it, but I'm hoping that The Tenant that comes out later this year is a little bit better and more up my alley. Next book on the list is also a new book, and just looking in general, I have quite a few newer novels that I read in February. If you guys have the Libby app, if you're audiobook listeners like me, I listen to pretty much everything through my Libby app, through my library, and there's a section where you can see what audiobooks are coming to your library, and so normally it's newer novels, right? And you can put holds on them before the book's even published. So I probably have a good 50 books on hold that aren't published yet. So that way I'm kind of one of the first people to get them, and I can read them, as soon as they come in. So I'm able to read a lot of books that way. But if you use the Libby app, go look for audiobooks or ebooks, whatever, and click coming soon. And you can see what books are coming to your library, and put them on hold so you get your place in line. So this next one is called Cross My Heart by Megan Collins. And this is about a woman named Rosie who had to get a heart transplant. And she gets a heart of a woman who has recently died. What was her name? Does it say? Daphne. Daphne is the woman who passed that has given, Rosie her heart. Daphne's husband, named Morgan, and Rosie start chatting. They have this donor website. They're able to send messages back and forth between the recipient of the heart, and the donor. And so Morgan and Rosie are able to communicate and start kind of building a friendship, through Rosie having Daphne's heart. Well, then there's some suspicion that Morgan isn't describing Daphne's death in the correct way, and that maybe it wasn't so innocent, and maybe Morgan had something to do with it. And the story, unravels from there. I did like this book. I gave it a 3-star. It was enjoyable. It had some good twists and turns in it that I wasn't expecting. Rosie seemed just like a really sad person, and I felt for her throughout a lot of this book. And it kind of makes you grateful too for your health, because this was a woman who seemingly, had her whole life in front of her, and all of a sudden she started having heart problems and ended up having to get a heart transplant, and how to deal with that and the things that come with that. So that part of the book was really interesting for me. The mystery and thriller was good and nothing to write home about, but I definitely enjoyed this novel. Gave it 3 stars, and I would read more from her. If you see me looking to the side, I've got my computer with my Goodreads pulled up, so I can see all the books. I really dislike how Goodreads has changed the view of your reading year, and trying to get to the books that I read is a little more nuanced. Okay, the next one is Tell Me What You Did by Carter Wilson. This was just published in January as well, so a new psychological thriller to the market. This is about this woman named Poe, and Poe hosts this podcast called Tell Me What You Did. Really interesting concept. It's basically bringing criminals or just people that have done something bad in their life onto the podcast anonymously, and they can say what they did. They can confess and share what they did and why they did it. Really interesting. Really interesting concept. So one day on Poe's podcast, this man comes on and says, "This is who I am, and I killed your mother." Poe's mother died years ago when she was younger, and Poe witnessed it, and the perpetrator has been at large ever since. This man comes on and says, "No, it was me. I killed your mother." But the kicker is Poe killed a man already that she thought was her mother's killer. So did Poe kill an innocent man? Who is this man that's coming on to her podcast confessing? Really interesting story. I liked the premise of this one a lot. Gave it a 3 stars. It was nothing that stood out per se as being one of the best books I've ever read, but definitely a good thriller. I think a lot of people would like this, and I liked the podcast type form. And if you listen to the audiobook, it's narrated in a podcast type of way, which I really appreciate. It makes for listening to be really easy. So definitely one that I would recommend if that premise sounds intriguing to you. The next one is called Beautiful Ugly by Alice Feeney. This is another new one that came out in January. I really enjoy Alice Feeney as an author, and so whenever she puts out a book, normally I will jump on it. This is about a man named Grady Green. Loved that name so much. Grady Green is an author, and he gets some really great news on the phone, and he goes to call his wife to share the great news, and something kind of nefarious happens on the phone with his wife, and his wife disappears, never to be seen from again. So he has the best day of his life and the worst day of his life all in one day. So it's been about a year. Nobody has seen or heard from his wife, and his editor, I can't remember what her title is. She has this little house in an island in Scotland, and she was like, why don't you go there? And why don't you sit in this little cabin, change of scenery, and write your next book? Like, it would be good for you to get away and write your next book. Scotland is really high on my bucket list, and it just seems so cozy and kind of mysterious. So I liked that a lot. He gets to this island and things are a little weird. He's not allowed to have a car. There's no working phones. He suspects people around him are talking about him, and he's getting visions of his wife in different parts of the island. Is she really there? Is he hallucinating and going crazy? What is the truth? The ending of this book, I gave it a 4 stars. I really enjoyed this book. I liked the premise of it. I liked the location of it. The ending fell a little bit short for me. Kind of once you figured out what was going on, and just the general ending of the book wasn't my favorite of her novels. But in general, really enjoyed this one. I gave it 4 stars. And like I said, Alice Feeney is just a kind of an automatic buy for me. I've read quite a few of her novels. Don't know what my favorite one would be. Rock, Paper, Scissors, Daisy Darker was really good. His and Hers, rated all those 4 stars. So in general, she's a very high-rated author for me, and this one was no exception. If it had been on any other location, I think it being in Scotland really did something for me, and it kind of helped that I didn't love the ending as much because I really loved the location. So maybe that would have been different if it had been someplace else, but overall, definitely a great read. Next, I got into some Stephen King. Little bit different than anything I've ever read from Stephen King. This is called Later, and this was published in March of 2021, so not that long ago. I don't remember hearing about it. It was a nominee for Reader's Favorite Horror in 2021 for Goodreads. This is kind of almost, I wouldn't say it's super scary or anything. It's almost kind of a crime novel in some ways. Essentially, this is a short book. It's, I don't know, 200 pages maybe. This is about a boy who can see dead people. Not in the Bruce Willis Sixth Sense type of way. He can see people right after they've died for a very short period of time. So if he goes to a place where a body is, or, the person's home, whatever, he can see that person for a little bit before they disappear. And so he's been able to produce some information for the police and, various people about how these individuals have died, or if they're missing something, where something's located. And then the police use it to their advantage. I'll just say that. Really can't say any more, or kind of spoils things, but maybe not everybody who has passed is the nicest to this boy, and he has some kind of creepy interactions with people. So it's kind of a crime novel, a lot about the police and going to murder investigations, and talking to dead people, and maybe the interactions aren't as pleasant as some of them. Really interesting book. I gave it a 3 stars. This is not one of the Stephen King masterpieces, right? This is not, your Pet Sematary or Salem's Lot, his big, The Stand, 11/22/63. These are not his big books, but it was a fun story, creepy in some ways, not overly scary, and I just really enjoy Stephen King as a writer, and I never heard of this one, so glad that I picked it up. Next, I read A Talent for Murder by Peter Swanson. So this is a 3rd book in a series. The Henry Kimball, Lily Kittner series. It is the third book after A Kind Worth Killing. So A Kind Worth Killing was number 1, A Kind Worth Saving was the second one, and then A Talent for Murder is the third. I did not go into this book having high hopes because I read The Kind Worth Killing, and that book easily could have been a standalone, but that book is one of the best mystery thrillers. Like, it is top of my list. Like, if I had to pick a top 5 best mystery thriller, that one would be on the list. I loved that one so much. The second one, A Kind Worth Saving, I didn't love as much. That one was only a 3-star for me. So when I saw that he came out with a third one, I was like, okay, what is this one? What is this one going to be? And so I went in not having high hopes. This is a really short book, maybe 250 pages at best. Very short, but I liked this one a lot. I ended up giving it 4 stars, so it was kind of in between the first and second one for me. Really enjoyed this one. So this is about a woman who, her name's Martha. Martha gets married to this man, and she starts to suspect that maybe her husband, what was his name? Alan. I wanted to say Andy. I was like, I don't think that's right. She starts to suspect that Alan is maybe responsible for killing and attacking people. Alan goes to a lot of conferences and travels for work, and she starts to put together connections of people that have died or attacks that have happened at various locations that Alan has been on conferences, and she's able to put together a pattern, and she starts to suspect that he has something to do with it, and she doesn't know how to handle it. Does she address Alan and tell him this is her suspicion? Because if it's not true, well, her marriage is down the drain, right? She just ruined her marriage. But if it is true, obviously that would be a pretty big thing. So she confides in Lily Kittner, which is somebody that's, in the first 2 novels, as well as just a third-party perspective. If you were me, what would you do? Tell me your advice. And so they kind of hatch this plan to figure out if Alan is killing these people when he goes on a conference. Really, really good. This had a few twists and turns. At one point, the book, probably about halfway through, the book has a twist, and it completely changes direction. And I was listening to it in an audiobook, like cleaning the house and stuff one Saturday, and I just stopped what I was doing. It had to be like, what just happened? Because it came out of left field, and it was so crazy, and then you pivoted in a different direction. I love books like that so very much. So I really enjoyed this. I gave it a 4 stars. You probably could read this as a standalone, but it does go into some background of the other books, and so I think it's better read in the trilogy form. But again, this is the 3rd book in that series, so if you have not read A Kind Worth Killing, take that from this book talk to pick up A Kind Worth Killing by Peter Swanson, because it is so good. And then you can continue the series if you would like. Okay, the last book I have for today and for February is Grady Hendrix's newest novel, and it is called Witchcraft for Weyward Girls. Okay, this is categorized in horror, but I guess horror is however you make it to be. This almost to me was more real life horror than anything, paranormal or fantasy or, anything like that. This is about a group of girls back in the 1970s, and you follow the main character named Fern, and Fern is 15 years old and she's pregnant, and her parents are not very happy about it. So they send Fern, she's seen as a disgrace, and they send her away for the summer for her pregnancy to live in this home with all these other girls, these other wayward girls that are also pregnant. And they live in this home through having a baby. the baby gets put up for adoption, and then the girls get sent back to wherever they live. So basically a way to cover up the shame of a teenage pregnancy as was felt back in the 70s, right? So that part of it is like almost horror in some ways too, thinking about what somebody young or unmarried being pregnant back before it was, a little bit more accepted in our society, what that was like. And they go to this home and they start getting involved in some witchcraft. And some of the spells they do are a little bit nefarious, and kind of this main witch that they are interacting with turns out to be bad news. She's not great. And so there's a fight between personal stuff going on in their lives and having babies, and do they want to put these babies up for adoption, and how could they take care of them, and who got them pregnant? Is it somebody of appropriate age or not? And dealing with those things, and then the witchcraft side of it, and all of the craziness that came with that. This was a good book. I gave it 3 stars. I will say it's nothing that is standing out to me. And of all the Grady Hendrix books that I've read, my favorite one, the one that I really enjoyed, was the very first one I ever read. And it is the Southern Girl's Guide to Slaying Vampires. Loved that one. I thought that one was so good. And honestly, the rest of them for me have kind of fallen short. Not that they're bad books. I have enjoyed every one that I've read, but sometimes his horror can be a little bit out there for me in some ways. And so I did feel that way with this one a little bit, that some parts were just a little out there, a little bit of a stretch, but overall still enjoyed it. Probably not an author though that I'm scrambling to pick up next time he comes out with a book. I'm just finding them okay. When the Southern Girl's Guide to Slaying Vampires, I really enjoyed that one. So I definitely would recommend that if you have never read any Grady Hendrix. I would recommend this one too. This one's just more filled with a lot of trauma and these young girls dealing with the trauma of their lives, and then also some witchcraft thrown in. I like the cover of it though. It's very pretty. Okay, that is it. These videos take so long to do. Hope I gave at least a concise enough review for you to decide if this is, any of these are books for you or not. Like I said, The Wedding People is the next Sense and Sentences book club pick. That live will be on Friday, March 21st, and I'm currently reading The Stand, so I hope to have that one finished so we can chat about The Stand in my March wrap-up. What is the best book that you read in February? For me, it definitely was the Kill for Me, Kill for You by Steve Cavanaugh. Thank you guys so very much for watching, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.